Madam Web is a movie that was made fun of and expected to be bad. Since it was announced, it's such a stupid concept, and especially after the terrible trailer came out. A trailer that was so bad that Dakota Johnson fired her agent. And during the press tour for this movie, Dakota Johnson struggled to say anything positive about it, instead saying things like this. But is the movie really that bad? Yes. In fact, it's probably worse than you think it is. Very rarely do I see a movie that has absolutely no redeeming qualities. Most movies I watch, there's at least one thing I like about it. Whether it's a performance, a character, a scene, even something small like a costume or a joke. This movie had nothing I liked about it. They should show this movie in film school as an example of what not to do. The writing is absolutely atrocious. It feels like it was made by an AI or translated from another language. The movie opens with the villain, a guy who inexplicably dresses like Spider-Man to confuse people when they watch the trailer, seeing a vision of his death at the hands of three women who are in Spider-Man-esque costumes that all have superpowers. These three characters, played by Sydney Sweeny, Isabella Merced, and Celeste O'Connor, never get superpowers throughout the whole movie. The movie opens with them having superpowers, and it's an origin story for them, but they do not get superpowers. The ending of the movie, in fact, is Madam Web seeing a vision of them with superpowers doing stuff, which will, I guess, happen in a sequel for this movie that will never come out. And that's the least of this movie's writing problems. All the dialogue is so stiff and the exposition is so unnatural. Madam Web and Uncle Ben are both EMTs and they're best friends. In an early scene in the movie, Uncle Ben randomly brings up the fact that he's a veteran, something that Madam Web would already know, and Madam Web randomly brings up the fact that she's an orphan, something that Uncle Ben would already know. The movie is essentially a straight comedy with very few serious scenes and everyone constantly making jokes. Dakota Johnson's character of Madam Web is written to be over the top socially awkward, like a character from a Hallmark movie or something. And the three super powered to be girls that she's protecting because she gets visions of the villain killing them are characters I would say are archetypes, but they basically forgot to make them archetypes. Sydney Sweeny is nerdy, but also Isabella Merced's character is nerdy and she really likes math. And then Celeste O'Connor's character is just like, oh, I'm cool and I get in trouble. None of them even have the most basic of arc, like learning to be more confident or trusting other people. They all are just sort of there. And then you have the issue of the villain being someone who has super strength, and Madam Web's only power being seeing the future. This leads to them unable to have any action scenes where they fight, because the teenage girls don't get superpowers. Most of the quote-unquote action scenes involve Dakota Johnson having a vision of the evil guy murdering the three girls, and then she's like, oh no, I need to prevent that vision, and then she drives her car into the evil Spider-Man. Something that happens twice in the movie. And then at the end, they defeat him by luring him into a fireworks factory and setting off all the fireworks, dodging all of them because Dakota Johnson can see the future. The performances are terrible. Obviously, the writing and directing did not help. Dakota Johnson is way over the top, performing this character like no human that has ever existed, playing the role like an alien who has never interacted with a person before. Sydney Sweeny is the least bad of all the performances, but it's still pretty bad. The other girls are bad. Adam Scott as Uncle Ben is bad. He has no personality or charisma. The villain is terrible. His voice sounds weirdly dubbed in. It reminds me of when you're watching like a Nintendo Direct. There's a guy with the weird voice who dubs over everything and it just sounds so unnatural. That's what his voice sounds like throughout this movie. I don't think his voice was dubbed, but there is a lot of dubbing throughout this movie that is very bad and very obvious, where there's characters at like a side profile and they dub dialogue in, but you can see their mouths not moving. The end action scene is especially egregious for this, where I'm pretty sure there was not any dialogue in the script for most of it, but they dubbed over it, them being like constantly talking, cutting over each other's words, just constantly talking, and you can very obviously tell that they're not talking. There's a lot of continuity errors like that. Do a close-up of one character and you'll see the other character's head in the frame in a specific position motion, and then it'll cut to the close-up of the other character, and they will be in a completely different spot. The movie's shot like absolute garbage. Most of the time it's just flat, wide shots. The camera's barely moving. It's not dynamic in any way. Also, Emma Thompson plays Peter Parker's mom in this movie. For some reason, it's such a small role, I have no idea why they got it, like a named actress to play her. And I don't know if there were rights issues or something, but they're in the hospital and she's giving birth and the camera's focusing on them and the dialogue is like loud and she's saying like, oh, welcome, you know, welcome my little baby. And she's clearly about to say the name Peter, but then her dialogue gets really muffled and the camera is just focusing on some other random shit. And I don't know if it was like a rights issue or Disney's like, you can't mention Peter Parker in the movie. You're not allowed to. I'm not letting you do it. Which is really the only thing I could think of as to why there'd be this like abrupt muffling of dialogue. They either didn't want to or weren't allowed to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So they say something stupid like, when you accept responsibility, you gain great power, or something like that. I don't remember the exact line, but it sounds like a Chinese bootleg mistranslation of it, which is just generally how the movie feels. Before I close out, I just want to bring out something very funny to me that Madam Web says at the end of the movie. After Peter is born, one of the characters says, wow, Uncle Ben's so lucky. He gets all of the fun and none of the responsibility. And Madam Web goes, that's what he thinks. Meaning she can see the future and sees that Peter Parker's parents will tragically die, and presumably that Uncle Ben, her best friend, will be gunned down in the street in 16 years or so. And she does nothing to prevent this. She just makes a coy joke and winks at the camera, essentially. Anyway, this is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. It's baffling that it even exists and is a real movie. Everything about it is bad. Do not watch it. Anyway, what's your favorite superhero movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, check out my video on The Marvels, another bad superhero movie. Bye bye.